contracts. Anyway, Audible has reached a settlement with the book publishers that were suing them. The terms of the settlement have not been worked out, but as a former lawyer, I feel secure in saying it probably involves Audible paying them some money and altering their contracts in the future. This is the way that problems should be resolved. People belittle lawyers and make stereotypical remarks, but at least this matter got dissolved. I don't know how they're going to fix what's going on at RWA or what's going on with some of these other sensitivity issues. Maybe at some point somebody needs to establish some guidelines, but I worry that we're walking into a world where there's going to be an ongoing debate about who has the right to write what. I feel like a writer has the right to write any book they feel compelled to write, that they have the authority and the passion for. And while people have the right to criticize it if they didn't like the book, all these complaints that are basically just saying you're of the right race and therefore you can never write that book are perhaps completely antithetical to what writing is all about. In my writing tips section, I want to emphasize to each of you the importance of coming up with a solid and appealing premise for your book before you set out to write it. I have written a whole book on this subject, of course, Powerful Premise, and I hope if you haven't read it, you'll check it out. But the idea is that, especially if you hope to sell this book commercially, or if you hope to get an agent with it, come up with something that's going to appeal to them up front. This is a much better approach than writing whatever first thing pops into your head and then going to conferences and getting frustrated because nobody's interested in it. Why would you think they would be interested in it? You weren't thinking about the agent or the market in advance, and maybe you should. And that's why I want to tell everybody about the hashtag for Twitter, hashtag MSWL. That's for Manuscript Wish List. There's also a website, mswishlist.com. And this is where many editors and literary agents are posting what they're looking for, their acquisition wishes. These are the kinds of books that I would be interested in looking at. Well, if you have the savvy to go to that Twitter feed or that web page and see specifically what some agents are looking for, and you've got the right idea or the right manuscript, obviously that's going to appeal to them a lot more. Some of the themes that you'll see people are looking for are genre-bending themes, close-ups on serious issues, particularly in young adult fiction or middle-grade fiction, and an ongoing interest in underrepresented voices, fraught with danger though that may be, especially where there's humor. Books that encourage ambition in the young and hopefulness are also very much sought after. I've got to look at a few of these specific requests that I found when I looked at MS Wishlist because they are so on target with exactly what I say in Powerful Premise. So now I'm going to pat myself on the back and say, see, I told you, but it's true. Big stakes, genre blending. All of these are emotional impact. All of these are in the book, and all of these seem to be what some agents are looking for. For instance, genre bending or genre blending or blurring or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of interest in that. For instance, Mary C. Moore, a terrific agent that I've had in the past at WriterCon, says that she's looking for, quote, adult fantasy that crosses over to book club fiction, a la The Snow Child or The Night Circus, end quote. Similarly, another literary agent, Michelle Bauer, is saying that she, quote, I want some really good commercial fiction. My list has been trending literary over the years, so rock me with your crime fiction and suspense, your genre-bending reads, and your love stories. Big ideas wanted. Again, that's the message of Powerful Premise. Big ideas, think big. By genre bending, she means an inversion of the usual. a vampire novel where vampires aren't bad guys, but they're cute, adorable, sparkly teenagers, to give an obvious example. Something that blends romance with crime fiction or similar blurring of interests, of genre interests. There's also a lot of interest in the YA field in books that focus on the inner life of real people, real young people's problems and questions. For instance, Megan Manzano and the literary agent Kiki Nguyen have concurred with another author's tweet and said, quote, "I want more fantasy where the stakes are not the entire world, but just like this one street corner or house, one friendship. You don't have to shake the pillars of the earth to get my attention," end quote. You see what they're saying. They're saying, I'm not looking for another thriller where the whole world is in danger, or a science fiction thing where it's the whole galaxy or something like that, but focus on the needs of one particular person. Make it real. Make it like what kids today are going through. And of course, if you look at the wish list, you'll see a lot of literary agents and editors still wanting to hear about voices that in the past historically have been marginalized. That could be LGBTQ characters. That could be racial, what they're now calling BIPOC characters, BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Put them in love stories, says book editor Laura Brown, or put them in children's books even, or books for young people, middle grade, and young adult, says Dana Childiak. There are a lot of people looking for, quote, novels with settings that are unfamiliar to American readers, novels with characters that are unfamiliar with American settings, end quote. So if any of this appeals to you, get on the wish list and start targeting the right agents. If you've got manuscripts they'd be interested in, send them to them. But even if you don't, the point is, while I don't think you should write to the market, I do think you should be looking at trends and seeing what people are interested in. Sometimes just a little bit of tweaking can make your book have a bigger premise or more marketability. And while I don't want you to despair and say that, oh, Bill's so commercial, he's horrible and whatnot, I know that a lot of people are going to finish a book and then be frustrated because nobody's interested in it. So maybe it would be worthwhile to give this business some thought before you spend all that time writing the book. My interview this time is with Randy Varnell, who is a developer at the hugely successful Gearbox video game company. And he'll be talking about what he does and specifically how important storytelling is to a successful video game. Now, this interview was recorded at WriterCon in a room with a lot of people in it, so that's why you'll hear people responding and reacting to what he says. One of those people in the room was Donald Moss, the very famous literary agent and author who's been at the Writers' Conference a couple of times. You'll hear Donald speak toward the end of the interview, and that's the reason why Randy Varnell mentions him and his book, The Fire in Fiction. The fact that Randy is so familiar with that work should give you an indication of just how important storytelling is to a successful video game. Here's what he had to say. Randy Varnell, you are an extremely successful video game designer, programmer, writer. I don't know what the best word is, but
well, sort of all of the above. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. I currently hold the title as managing producer of narrative at Gearbox Software. I run a team of 4 writers and a VO director and a motion graphics designer that are all about writing the games that we make at Gearbox. So Gearbox has a couple of big titles. We started way back when, but the ones people would recognize, Brothers in Arms is one of our first big breakouts, a very historical World War II franchise. Most of my time there has been on Borderlands, which is kind of
right.
I was the design producer on Borderlands 2, and I'm currently Well, I can't tell you what I'm currently doing, but I was a design producer on Borderlands 2. You're about to make me tell trade secrets, Don, but was creative director on Battleborn, which released a couple of years ago. Didn't do as well. Only after 4 years, only hit about 3 million users on that. So,
boo-hoo.
I know in the video game industry, though, for the AAA stuff, that's not enough to make back what you put into it. So,
yeah.
But put a lot of my heart and myself into that, and I think one of the reasons that I'm here for this is after all of that, I've read. Series fantasy since I was probably 7 or 8. I was one of those my mom read to me when I was a kid and hooked me. And I've read everything. And I'm still kind of pinching myself even just to sit in this room with you guys and do this after everything that I've been able to do in the video game industry, because I am a lifelong fan of books and reading and writing. And I went on the most circuitous route I could ever imagine to get to where I am in the games industry with writing now. Went through really production and management and testing and then into design and then direction. And now get just the privilege of narrative designing and writing and crafting with a group of people in more of the writer's room type of environment, a little bit more like screenplays than novel writing. So this weekend, I'm not here for Gearbox. I'm here for me. I've got just hit a first draft of a fantasy novel that's around between 120 and 170,000 words, depending on how you want to cut it up. Way too big, but I'm learning. And I'm back with hat in hand, kind of starting at the beginning of the line again, just as a sponge. What can you tell me? What can you teach me? How does this industry work? It's a little bit different than the one I've come from. And it's been, the first 2 days have just been absolutely staggeringly mind-blowing, amazing. I can't even say the words. It's been really, really cool. Just a privilege.
That's great to hear. Now, if you don't mind, you told me something earlier. You said that despite your tremendous success in the gaming business, your ultimate, passion, future dream would be to be a writer. And I bet there's some writers here who would probably like to travel the other direction and get into gaming. Why is writing so important?
Well, writing is the human experience. And I think what we're realizing is, especially in the gaming industry, is interactive fiction continues to develop and morph. Gaming's kind of the rude adolescent of the media industry. If you want to go back to, books that have been around for thousands of years, and then radio and movies and video games have really only been around for 30, 35 years, maybe if you really want to stretch 40, if you want to go back to Pong.
This is what I was about to say. Does Pong count?
45 maybe. But, in the beginning, it was just, a couple of little sprites on the screen and a ball that went back and forth. And now what we really see are the things that are connecting again with our audiences are games that tell a story. And not just that, Borderlands is kind of a fun because it's kind of got that dark humor twist in it and that nasty little over the top kind of in a Mad Max universe, unexpected, unbelievable, but good villains, good heart to the story, things that still resonate. When we go to conventions and we talk to fans, we don't hear stories about, man, that thing that I shot was really cool. They dress up as our characters. And they tell me, this character touched me. I was telling you earlier at dinner, one of our most popular characters is Tiny Tina, who in our weird Mad Max universe is a 13-year-old girl in Borderlands 2 who's an explosives expert. And when you first meet her, she's literally singing the Pop Goes the Weasel song and pushing the plunger on the dynamite and blowing the bandit up, right? What you realize about 15 minutes later of the gameplay and the kind of story that she walks you through is that her parents were abducted by these wild bandits in the wasteland and killed almost in front of her a couple of years. And she was left as an orphan. And her character development is all about how in this complete wild west of a planet, what happens to you? And when you have this kind of revenge motivation, this deep feeling of hatred and wanting to get back. So she actually walks you, the player, you get to experience this journey with her of hunting down the actual bandit who murdered her parents, and then kind of get a little bit tricked into luring her to her place where she's going to have a tea party with the bandit. I did air quotes there, tea party with the bandit, and wreak some of her personal vengeance. She's a character that has actually speaks in multiple voices. She has a crazy voice, and she has a kind of a British aristocrat voice, and then she has her serious voice, when she gets that. And those characters are wild and unusual, but they touch something in people's hearts. They're relatable stories that go through all of them. So you really see in the broader video game industry for the last 3 or 4 years, the games that are really hitting, that are the game of the year, that the people are really buying, are games that have compelling stories, have compelling narrative, really look at a way to attach the reader to characters. And it doesn't matter whether you're telling, space marine